After the Paleolithic period, after the Earth started to warm again after the last great ice age, this meant that there were significant changes in the populations of the areas that we have been studying, primarily Europe, because all of these early cave paintings that we saw throughout France and throughout modern day Spain, the cultures that produced those disappeared because they went away when the climate changed, when the food sources that they had been living on either migrated away or died off. And so this sort of flurry of art for, 20,000 years or so that we see during the late ice age, during the end of the Paleolithic period, stops in Europe. And so we have to shift our focus to the Middle East and to a place that we call Mesopotamia, which today is modern day Iraq. This area of Mesopotamia means between two rivers. The two rivers are the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. And between these rivers grew up several civilizations. The sort of granddaddy of them all is a civilization we call Sumer. One of the things that makes Sumer so important and historically is the fact that it is historical. It creates history, and it does this through written language. Sumer's written language began as a series of pictures, or what we call pictographs, or sometimes pictograms. And as you can see in this image, the earliest words were pictures of the things they were describing. So the word for a bull's head looked like a bull's head. A word for bull looked like a bull. But throughout time, these symbols became more abstract and represented sounds or the words themselves, and didn't attempt to be representations of the things they were depicting. We call this writing cuneiform, but this is significant because now we have writing. Now we have intent. We understand what these ancient people did, what they were trying to do, what they believed in, how their societies were set up, all sorts of things. And we have thousands and thousands of clay tablets letting us know what the ancient Sumerians did and how they lived. And so we have important religious documents, but we also have things like epics. The first epic, called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I would highly recommend reading, was written at this time. So the Sumerians were a religious society, and like all ancient cultures, religion is going to dominate the culture. It's going to dominate the art. It's going to dominate the architecture. Sumerians were a polytheistic society. They worshipped multiple gods. This was a very religious society. It is more or less a theocracy meaning that it is a religious-based society. In the center of each town was a district that was dedicated to one of the gods. Each city had sort of its own sort of patron god or goddess, although they did worship multiple gods and goddesses. Each city sort of had its own kind of home god, and that would be the subject of the main temple located in the middle of town. These ancient Sumerians constructed these artificial mountains that are known as ziggurats. Here's a reconstruction of a ziggurat. These were quite large. They could be 40, 50 feet tall. Sitting on top of that would have been then a temple, which would have been about the same height as the ziggurat. You are looking at what is known as the White Temple, called this because of its white facing. That was located in the middle of one of the larger of the Sumerian cities, a city called Uruk. The ziggurat was accessed through a series of steep steps. It was constructed of mud brick, and the temple was constructed of stone. The temple would have been exclusive only to the priest, so your average person would not have been able to be allowed into the temple. These temples were literally called the waiting rooms of the gods. So it is thought in these temples the priest would communicate with the god or goddess, who would then come down and depart divine information to the priest. The top of the temple would have been coated with basically what is asphalt, a material called bitumen. What you call me? No, I'm joking. A material called bitumen, which is the foundation of asphalt. If not bitumen, then another similar material would have been used to help with erosion. The sides of the ziggurat were also sloped in a way to allow for water runoff to keep from the wearing and tearing of the bricks. In the center of the temple, there would have been things like a fire pit for offerings. There would have been an altar, A-L-T-A-R, for offerings, where there would have been sacrifices made to the gods or the goddess. So why do you think that the ancient Sumerians went to so much trouble building artificial mountains to put their temples on? And if you're thinking because it brings them closer to the gods, you're absolutely right. Something we're going to discover throughout this semester is that high places are holy places. And if you want to get closer to the gods, you have to ascend to them. And this is something we're going to see in religion after religion. We'll see this with the ancient Greeks and Mount Olympus. In Japan, there's Mount Fuji, which is sort of the site of, or the origin place of a lot of the Shinto spirits of Japanese religious beliefs. Even in Judaism and Christianity, you have Moses ascending Mount Sinai to get the holy word of God. So high places are holy places. But if you're in the middle of Mesopotamia, if you're near Uruk, let's say, in ancient Sumer, then there are no mountains. So you have to build one to get closer to the gods. And you place it right in the middle of town, so this can be seen from miles and miles and miles away. This shows us also the importance, literally the centrality of the importance of religion in ancient Sumer, and that you put the most important things right in the middle of town and you put them up high where everybody can see them. Something else that is interesting is that buried beneath this, the ziggurat at the foundation, what we call foundation deposits, are a leopard and a lion. We found the bones of these animals. Now, the reason for this is more than likely because these represent powerful creatures, powerful spirits. You want to associate the power of the gods with a powerful animal. This is something we have seen all the way back to the Paleolithic period, which we just studied, with the use of bulls. Inside, you would have seen a continuation of that sort of whitewashed, those whitewashed surfaces, but you would have also seen what were called cone tiles. These are pieces of clay that have came in different colors depending on the kinds of natural pigments that were found in the clay, or that could be added to the clay. So you could add different kinds of clay together, or even metal pigments, or in some cases even vegetable pigments, and stain these tiles different colors. The tiles would have been polished, so they would have had a sort of sheen to them, but they would have been shaped like a cone, like an ice cream cone. And the walls of the building would have been made from soft clay, and so these cones could have been just shoved, pushed into the clay itself. Because when you are in this temple, when you enter this temple, you are now in the realm of the gods. You have passed from one plane to another. Think of it this way. This holy mountain is something that you ascend. And as you walk up these stairs, as you walk up the stairs of the ziggurat, you are moving into the realm of the gods. And as you take this journey, you are moving from one plane of existence, the secular plane, into the sacred plane. And so all of these different kinds of strategies, these different sorts of special effects inherent in the architecture, would have been used to delineate, to clearly define those separations. So as you walk up the stairs, as you ascend to the heavens, it is meant, as you walk up the stairs, it is meant to sort of differentiate the two sort of realms, sacred and secular realms. And then the same thing would happen as you walk into the temple. And so the attempt here is to kind of dazzle you. This temple was large. It was 30, 40 feet tall with these towering walls with light streaming in from the windows. You would have seen this large sacred altar. There would have been a large fire pit where sacrifices would have been made. And you can imagine sort of the dazzling effect of the light coming in from the windows and the fire dancing in the fire pit, reflecting off of these cone tiles, forming these patterns. Other things that we have found in these temples, this comes from another temple, not the temple, the White Temple at Uruk, but a temple at a place called Eshnuna. These are votive, these are called votive figures. These were found buried under the floor of the temple, so these were meant to be placed there for a specific purpose, for a religious purpose. These figures vary from anywhere from a few inches tall to over 2 feet tall. They vary in size. The size of the figure relates to the importance of the person depicted. These are not just generic statues, but these were meant to depict real people. And we know this because their names are inscribed on the base of the statues. Thank you, Sumer, for inventing writing and making our job easier as historians. So we now know what these represent. They represented real people. You can see that their hands are clasped. This is a symbol of prayer. It is very possible that some of these figures also are holding cups that were made as liquid offerings, or what is known as a libation. That's Libation, which is a liquid offering. And these figures are standing in this form of prayer. This is what is known as a votive figures. Votive figures are figures of are any sort of object of offering. You've probably heard of votive candles. Those are prayer candles. You're meant to light them like at a memorial service as a sign of your memory or a prayer to that person. Or you can just light them on if you're familiar with Catholic traditions, you light a votive candle as a symbol of prayer. And so these served a very similar purpose, except instead of being candles, they're figures in this state of sort of never-ending prayer, buried beneath the floor of the temple, standing in for the person who they represent, who can't be there the entire time praying morning, noon, and night. So they would make this offering of this votive figure. You'll also notice they have massive eyes. This is proof that Japanese anime existed no, that's not what it is. What this means is that they are in the presence of the god or goddess. They have been spiritually awakened. Their eyes are literally open. Also, it probably means they are waiting vigilantly for the god or goddess to arrive. But it's meant to reflect the presence of the god or the goddess. You'll notice that the figures are distinctly male and female, with the styles of dress delineating the two sexes. The men, of course, have these beards, which are signs of wisdom. They have this braided hair, and they wear these sort of fringed skirts. And if you look throughout the image, you can see that is inherent in all depictions of men. Women wear this sort of dress that covers only, leaves one shoulder bare, with sort of a drape over the left shoulder. So there is a distinction between male and female, but they are both here sort of equally represented as devotees of this god or goddess. This is called the Warka vase. This is a vase that was also found in Inanna's complex at Uruk, where we saw the White Temple in Ziggurat. This is then a sacred object once again. You'll see that it is divided into a series of distinct bands. We call these registers, and this is something very common in the ancient world. The register, Register. this shows us a series of offerings. But this is meant to show the ability of the goddess to provide. At the bottom, you see an image of people, maybe slaves. They are nude, so this is meant to show that they are not important. They have been stripped bare of rank or title, and they carry with them offerings, food primarily. But this is meant to show not only their devotion to the goddess, but the fact that the goddess is able to provide for her people in such a way that they have this bounty to offer her. If you look at the very top register of the vase over here on the right or on the left, you can see an image of one of these supplicants, one of these people, serving Inanna, giving her this offering. You'll notice that she stands in front of a gateway. And behind the gateway is an image, are more images of offerings and bounty. This is meant to represent the separation between the secular and the sacred world. This is a portal, if you will, an opening into this holy realm. So what we are seeing is once again, a sort of delineation between the two different kinds of spaces. This is known as the Stele of the Vultures. A stele is, S-T-E-L-E, is simply a stone used to mark a place, often used as gravestones, but they can also be used as monuments, memorials to battles, to monuments to kings. They can serve a lot of different things, but they're usually large-scale stones that are used to mark something important, a person or a place or an event. This is marking a victory of one city-state, a city called Lagash, over another city-state called Umma, and the stone is not complete. The stele is not complete, and we are only looking at one side of it. So these are placed sort of roughly where they should be. It is known as the Stele of the Vultures because at the very top we see an image of vultures carrying off the heads, the body parts of the slain, arms, heads, legs, of those slain in battle, showing the power and the might of the victors over the vanquished. If you look to the left, we can see an image of the king, a ruler here leading his soldiers into battle, who are standing here in this phalanx with their overlapping shields. Underneath, we see the king once again standing there leading his people. I want you to see that. I want you to look at the size of the king, especially down here at the bottom, compared to the rest of the soldiers. And also, let's zip back here and take a look at some of our votive figures. You'll notice that they are significant. Some of the votive figures are significantly taller than some of the other votive figures. Just as you'll notice that the king is significantly taller than the soldiers around him. This is the use of something called hieratic scale, and it basically means that if something is shown larger than anything else, that it is the most important. It is a symbol of power. It is a symbol of rule very often, certainly importance. So these figures here, this man and this woman, are more important than everybody else. The ancient Sumerians buried their dead in relatively elaborate graves. Preparing for the afterlife was an important aspect of life in ancient Sumer. It is what we would call a funerary culture, meaning that they placed great emphasis on the preparation of the dead. Because for the ancient Sumerians, as well as ancient Egyptians and other ancient cultures, death was just another phase of life. So you had to pack for it. You had to prepare for it. And especially the tombs of those in charge of the ruling classes could be filled with incredibly expensive and elaborate grave goods. We are looking at an object called the Standard of Ur. A standard is a flag or a banner or an object carried on top of a pole into battle. This is actually not a standard. This is a hollow box that initially, when it was discovered in the 19th century, was thought to be a standard. But archaeologists have sort of changed their minds on what it is. What it is we don't fully know. Some think that it might be a resonating box for an instrument, allowing sound to travel, but we honestly don't know. But what we do know is that it was made using very fine materials. It was made using this blue stone called lapis lazuli, which came from Afghanistan. This other sort of red stone, which came from India, and then there's shells here from the Persian Gulf. So that would be this inlay here. Whoever this was made for, this king, was very important and very powerful, and you can tell by the quality of the materials used to make this object. This was found in many, many, many fragments and was reconstructed. As you see, it is divided into 3 registers. You would probably notice at the top the king is fairly obvious. He is in hieratic scale. He is taller than everybody else. In fact, he's so tall that he actually breaks the frame of the register like a comic or something, popping his head out. And so we also know that it's the most important scene because it's at the top. So making things larger and placing them at the top is often a sort of shorthand for power. This image is divided into 2 sides. We call this side the war side, and then in a minute we're going to be looking at the peace side. At the bottom register, you'll see images of chariots being pulled by horses, and they are armed, and the soldiers riding in the chariots are armed with spears. If we look more closely, we can see the victory of battle. We can see the enemy being crushed beneath the feet of the horses here. If we return to the second register, we can see a row of soldiers, all armed and all in this sort of strict military procession. And then if you look over here on the right, you can see the vanquished enemy, who has once again been stripped bare as a sign of shame, as a sign of conquest, as a sign of having really sort of their power removed, stripped from them. And notice how they appear much more shambolic, much less structured in their positioning and the way they're moving compared to the regimented appearance of the soldiers. If we look at the top, we can see once again people who are of less importance, the smaller people compared to those who are larger than them. And in the center is the king holding a spear, holding a weapon, a symbol of his military might and power. If we look on the peace side, we can see the bounty provided by the king and really his largesse. Largesse is the word. It is generosity, the gifts or the money bestowed by one person onto another. And so at the bottom, we see something very similar that we saw on the Warka vase. We see images of people carrying goods, grain, also animals, beasts of burden. At the top, we see very clearly the king because he is on the left, but then he is sort of surrounded by these officials, are basically raising a toast in sort of celebration and in honor of their king. If you look at the right, you can see a musician playing a lyre, L-Y-R-E. Lyres were a very common instrument in ancient Mesopotamia. They would have not been associated just with sort of music for pleasure, but also music as part of a religious ritual. This is meant to show the sort of 2 sides of rulership. We see the king here on the war side in dominance, with his power and his ability to rule, and then and obtain victory in battle. And then on the peace side, we see the sort of opposite of that, his ability to provide. And one kind of feeds in to the other. This is called a bull-headed lyre, which I have been accused of before. But this is, once again, look, it's our bull. It's our horned animal, our symbol of power, our symbol of kingly power, our symbol of religious power. Let's take a look at another lyre, though. Let's zoom in here. This comes from a city called Ur. We are looking at a bearded bull. So beards we have seen before, symbol of masculinity, symbols of also wisdom. So this is a symbol of not just physical power, but intellectual power. Underneath the bull, we see an image, wooden image inlaid with shell and some lapis lazuli. And we see an image of various animals. We're not exactly sure what these mean. Some of these are meant to be maybe comical. They're maybe meant to tell stories about kingly rule, but certainly they have a religious connotation. At the top, you see a figure of a king, a man standing holding two bulls. This is more than likely a reference to the Epic of Gilgamesh, that Sumerian epic I told you about, where one of the adventures of Gilgamesh is he kills this bull of heaven. It actually ends up getting him in a lot of trouble, and he ends up losing his best friend ultimately because of it. But it is also a show of his power as a king. We are also seeing something that we saw before in Çatalhöyük, where we saw the goddess figure sitting enthroned with the two lions on either side. We're seeing something very similar in that heraldic figure of the king standing in the middle and on either side holding these naturally powerful animals at bay. Ancient Sumerians utilized something called cylinder seals. Stone or clay cylinders with carved lines depicting stories. These could be religious stories, they could be stories of kings or queens. They related to various daily activities of Sumerian society, but everybody would have, or a lot of people would have worn one of these as a symbol of who they were. But also these would have been used as a signature, because if you roll one of these across a soft clay tablet, it makes an impression. So this would have been used as kind of a signature. Businesses would have used these as a way of sort of putting their brand on things, or if you're shipping something, it tells you who it comes from. So these were more than just decorative, they were functional. And we have thousands and thousands and thousands of these that exist. In 2332 BC, the Sumerians were invaded by a neighboring people called the Akkadians. And so this is effectively the Indo-Sumerian society as we know it.